Is it 6:30?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I call to order meeting number 1777 of the Planning and Zoning Commission at 6:30 PM. Why don't we take a roll call for regular members? Joe Willett is present.
Richard Sullivan is present.
Ruthie. Something went crazy here. I'm present, Frank Gowdy.
Jim Thurs present.
Mike Kowalski's present.
All right. So for the time being, Commissioner Tim Moore is not available. So in accordance with our rotation, Ann, I have you up for acting in a capacity to vote tonight. Is that okay? I assume it is.
She needs to unmute her phone.
Okay. Next up, we have a legal notice. East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a regular meeting on Tuesday, March 24th, 2020 at 6:30 PM at the virtual East Windsor Town Hall, 11 Rice Street, Broadburg, Connecticut, with the following public hearing to be heard. Zone change application for Gemma, excuse me. I can't pronounce the last name either. 143 Bridge Street for a zone change from R2 to a B2. That's residential to business. All copies of the above application are available in the Planning Development Office. All interested persons may appear and be heard. Dated March 11, 2020. This appeared in the Journal Enquirer on March 12th, as well as March 19th, 2020. Are there any added agenda items?
No added agenda items.
This is the public participation portion of our meeting. Ruben, do you see any members of the public that are maybe waiting?
There's an East Windsor resident on the list, but they're not identified.
Well, so this is the public participation portion of our meeting. Are there any comments from the residents or anyone in the audience that's not already on tonight's agenda? If you would like to speak, just please remember to unmute your line and just state your name for the record. Okay, I'm not hearing any. I'll move on. Approval of minutes, March 10th, 2020. We all got an electronic copy of this. Are there any comments, questions, anything we want to talk about regarding the minutes?
Read them and okay with them.
I'm good.
I'm good also.
Joe, I'm going to have to abstain. I was not present.
No problem. Okay. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of regular meeting 1776 on March 10th, 2020 as submitted.
Motion was made by Commissioner Sullivan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any discussion? Hearing none. If you're in favor, please say aye. Joe Willett's aye.
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 Okay. Any noes?
Did Ann answer aye?
No, she is abstaining from the vote.
Yes, I'm abstaining.
Okay. So we have four ayes and one abstention for the record. Receipt of applications. I believe there were none.
Correct.
And Ruben, for the last, how do you pronounce the last name of Gemma?
Guanco.
Guanco. Okay.
Yep.
So new public hearings, a zone change application for Gemma Guanco, 143 Bridge Street for a zone change from R2 to B2. That's residential to business. The deadline for decision is May 14th, 2020. And I think the applicant's engineer is here, or Jay, perhaps?
Yes, Jay Ursary, J.R. Russo and Associates here representing Gemma Guanco with regard to this zone change application. She is not available tonight. Actually, she and her husband are away in the Philippines doing some work, I believe, at a hospital there. They're both retired physicians, and they've been away for a few months. I think they're coming back in June. So she asked me to represent her, and we will do that this evening. So just to give you a little background here, this is a property that's located on Bridge Street, and the property is about 0.4 acres in size, and it's essentially located on the south side, right across the street from the Children's Place. This is a parcel that's been residentially zoned probably since the house was built many years ago. It was used as a residence for a number of years. Gemma purchased it, I think, about 20 years ago, and she, as I said, she's a physician. She ran her office out of there for a number of years. She's now retired, and she would like to either be able to lease the property or possibly sell the property, and she realizes that obviously some type of a commercial, retail, some other use other than residential is the proper use for the area. So I think she had probably met with Ruben, and maybe prior to that with maybe Lori Witten some time back about applying for a zone change. So she came to see us. We put this plan together, which you have in front of you, as well as an application. And we took a look at your plan of conservation and development, which essentially is your guide for this particular type of an application. And your POCD talks about this particular area being in Warehouse Point as one of the new village districts. And I think Terry Hahn actually commented on the area and is involved again in your POCD in discussing this particular area and properties. And what they essentially recommend is a mixed use, and a mixed use of some type of commercial, retail type use with maybe some residential that could be located on the second floor to the rear, or some other type of a residential use along with it. So in looking through your zoning regulations currently and looking at the different uses available in that commercial area, we've got the B1 and the B2 zones. Both allow various different types of commercial uses, and they also allow residential uses as well as a mixed use. So it seems to fit the POCD in terms of what we're proposing here. And the other thing that we also have here is that we, if you remember, and I'm going to go back now to probably 2007 or somewhere thereabouts, we had an application before the commission that was for a large box warehouse, which I don't know that was ever disclosed, but I think everybody knew that it was a Lowe's. There was a zone change approved along with that for B2 zone for some of these parcels that are directly to the west of this piece. And it was all approved by the commission. The Wetlands Commission gave a permit, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved it. And it was probably in July or August of 2008, just before the economy took a real dip and Lowe's pulled out and they never built the facility. But I believe the zone change still stands. So there's probably somewhere around 35 to 40 acres of B2 land just to the west of this piece that's also zone B2. So
Remember that. I remember that.
it does appear, yeah, I think Frank was there. I think Joe was there too as well.
Yes.
I'm not sure who else
I was
on
there.
the commission. And Jim Thurs was there. So
Yeah.
we now know who all the older members are because it was a bit ago, but at any rate. So this seems to kind of be in fit with the area in terms of going to the B2 zone. So she would love to get it done. In fact, when the letters went out for the notices for this particular parcel, we got a call from an abutter that's one lot away that owns another commercial piece that's vacant and wanted to know what's going on. And they're already interested in maybe buying this one and looking at some others in the area to try to put something together that would probably combine 3 or 4 different parcels for some type of a future use down there on Bridge Street. So just the fact that she applied as far as it got some people interested in trying to maybe put deal together with Gemma to do something with this piece. So that's a basic overview of the application. I think it fits your POCD, and hopefully if you all agree and have the comfort level that I think you probably do, you could approve this for her. Any questions?
No one's in the audience from the abutting homeowners?
Well, we wouldn't know, Frank. They would have to speak up. We haven't opened up the public portion of the meeting yet.
Okay,
So this is just dialogue between commissioners and questions for Jay at this time. And I'll open it up for a public comment soon.
gotcha.
So why don't we try to go methodically through here? Commissioner Sullivan, Dick, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I do not. It does fit with the POCD. And right now there's, I'm looking at the existing zoning map, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different zones right within a very small area. And it would seem to me to make more sense to let's get this down to 1 or 2 zones.
Okay. Jim, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I agree with Dick. I'm good.
I think, as Dick said, I think it's consistent with our POCD and especially Terry's presentation as of recently.
Mike, any comments or questions?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this piece of property came before us maybe a year or so ago that somebody wanted to put in, I don't know the exact term, it was like a Reiki studio or something to that effect, for a massage, something like that. Do you recall that?
No,
Okay. I was just curious as to, for them to use it for a business at that time, there was no need for them to do a zoning change, because I believe we approved it.
Well, if that were true, Mike, I guess since they didn't build or initiate construction within 1 year, those approvals have since expired, relapsed.
Gotcha. And then my other comment was going to be, we're working on with Terry, what kind of a timeline would we be implementing the zoning changes that we're looking at for the whole Warehouse Point district? And would this conflict or have any kind of detriment to what we're trying to do with the whole village zoning?
Ruben, do you care to speak on that? I have my opinion if you're not comfortable or don't want to weigh in.
Well, you guys read my memo.
Yes, well, I have anyway, yep.
My professional opinion, for what it's worth, is that the proposed zone change makes perfect sense with the plan of conservation and development, makes sense with what's happening underground, where you have a lot of due diligence taking place by different property owners on both sides of the, across the river also, with the train station happening. There's a lot of buzz in the air about how to repurpose all these properties. To me, it's a no-brainer as a planner, but you guys have some history, as Jay provided some input, some parcels in the surrounding vicinity have undergone zoning changes in the past, and that's completely natural and to be expected from this area. But I'll let my memo speak for itself.
Ruben, this is Joe. I will ask one leading question. Do you think that this proposed zone change is complementary to the work that our consultant is doing?
Absolutely.
And okay, so I think that was more Mike's question. That Mike, is that correct? You kind of want to know how, if it conflicted, it was complementary, how it all
Correct.
fit with what Terry was doing.
Correct. I didn't want it to be counterproductive of what we're trying to accomplish there.
Yeah, it's completely in sync with what we're trying to accomplish on the planning side.
Okay, so then my last part of this is, it seems like now this is going to become a lot by lot spot approach to rezoning this area? Is there a more streamlined method to rezone this entire stretch along Bridge Street rather than having to go by, application by application?
Yes and no. I mean, the town could, work with the different property owners. And if we had more funding for Terry, she could facilitate that discussion. So we would have a corridor master plan of sorts, and property owners could basically join into that effort, and that could work. But it takes a lot of time, and not necessarily some property owners might be complacent with the zoning district that they do get. Remember that they do have to be in sync with what's happening in the area.
I agree.
Yeah, so.
Mike, any other comments at this time?
No, that is all. Thank you.
Ann, do you have any comments or concerns?
My comment is, I think it's, from what people are saying, it's along the lines and consistent with where we were heading in our conversations with Terry. My concern is, and it shouldn't stop us from proceeding, is how it's developed. Terry had really nice ideas of how to blend the whole area together with a look and a feel. And by this being done as one parcel, to me, it means we need to move forward to adopt, I'll say, Terry's vision, so that get the look and feel of, I'll say, a neighborhood as opposed to a spot by spot development.
Okay, thank you. Marty, are you on the telephone or on the computer?
I am on the telephone and I'm in agreement with everything I've heard so far.
Okay. Okay. I do not, this is Joe Willett. I do not have any questions myself. Is there anyone on the phone or on video, members of the public, have any questions or comments for the commission? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Jay, do you have any closing thoughts, any words of wisdom before we consider taking action?
No, I don't think so at this point. I mean, I do agree with the POCD and the work you've done and that Terry's been doing in terms of this area. And I think it's a benefit to the area to try and bring it to a village district with some mixed uses and promote some walkability. I think it's a wonderful thing for Warehouse Point. It's already kind of headed in that direction anyway, with the mix of uses that are there, with the supermarket and the pharmacy and the restaurants and the park in the center of town and the library and church. And it's just, the whole thing kind of makes sense. And I think there's a lot of areas in many towns that are heading in that direction. So I think it's a good thing. And I think it's a good direction to head in this area of Warehouse Point. So I think it makes a lot of sense. At this time, I really don't have any anything in addition to add, unless anybody has any questions. I will try to answer them for you. I guess the one thing I would say, that all the infrastructure is there in the area to support any type of a commercial use in terms of sewer, water, gas, power, all that stuff. It's all available.
Okay.
Joe, this is Frank. I have a question regarding neighbors. I happen to know one of the neighbors, and I don't think he would want to sell his house and get rid of his house. So what kind of a problem does that pose for us?
Well, it really doesn't. I mean, I'm sure he was invited to this public meeting. And if he had a concern, he had an opportunity to stop in a town hall, write a letter, or be present in today's tonight's discussion. So by virtue of not hearing from that person, unless they would like to speak up at this time, we'll have to assume there is not an issue, or elected not to say anything.
Okay, thank you.
Does any other commission member have any final thoughts?
Richard Sullivan? Changing this or any other residentially zoned piece of property to a B2 does not necessarily preclude that there could be a residential property there, does it?
I believe that's a true statement.
Correct.
Yes.
This is Frank. That was my concern also.
Well, is that really a concern? I mean, that it gives the property owner some options. That's all.
Mhm.
Is that a concern if it remains in residential in perpetuity because the homeowner or the property owner desires to leave it that way?
Well, this is Frank again. I think it's a benefit to that person that's living in the residential area. It gives him or her more options and obviously makes the property more valuable.
Okay, interesting perspective. Anyone else have any comments, concerns, something we haven't already talked about?
Richard Sullivan, I have none.
Frank Gowdy, I have none.
This is still a public hearing. Anyone from the audience, either on the telephone or video conferencing, have any questions or comments for the commission? Okay, hearing none. Someone would like to offer a motion to close the public hearing?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing for the application of a zone change map amendment on 143 Bridge Street.
There's a motion by Commissioner Kowalski for closing the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Gobin. For those in favor, say aye. Joe Willett.
Aye, Mike Kowalski.
Aye, Richard Sullivan.
And I, Ann Gobin.
Jim Thurs, aye.
Are there any no's out there? Okay, motion passes. Public hearing is closed. I hear a lot of background noise. Does someone need to mute their line?
I believe that's Mike.
No, I'm on mute all the time because I'm speaking.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Not me. I'm good.
And I'm good. There's no noise here at all.
I'm in Hawaii, so there's not me. All right. So would someone like to offer a motion to approve the application?
Someone make a motion, please.
Yeah, there's one in Ruben's, one of the attachments that Ruben has. He had a motion ready to go.
Richard Sullivan, I make a motion that we vote on the zone change application from Gemaguanco, 143 Bridge Street, for a zone change from R2 to B2, which is residential to business.
There's conditions of approval also, Dick? We
Oh,
already closed the public
sorry, I'm
hearing.
looking at the wrong
Yeah.
thing.
No problem. No problem. Take your time.
And this would also include the conditions number 1 through 3 on, as presented.
Okay, there's a motion on the table for approval of the zone change. Is there a second?
Second.
That was Mike that seconded it. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Joe Willett.
Ann Gobin, aye.
Jim Thurs, aye.
Richard Sullivan, aye.
Mike Kowalski, aye.
That's unanimous. 5 makes an approval. Okay, thank you very much.
Jay Ersry, thank you very much, and I will be leaving you and going to go have some dinner. Thank you again.
Good night, thank you.
Good night, Jay.
Next up, is old business, site visits. Ruben, anything you want to talk about under that?
All right, here we go. So, so we go out every week, and this time we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 complaints. Most of these you already have heard about. 5 Farms Road, you know, the whole, you know, Jason Ziegler drama. You guys called the bonds on March 10th. Len Norton provided a memo, which if you're able to see my screen, you'll see the memo right there. So this is an informative memo in which he's replying to the proposal that Coda Construction, which is the contractor for Jason Ziegler, submitted. So Len is making some professional engineering comments there. And this will be forwarded to Mr. Ziegler. But it is an informative item for you. As far as complaints per se, though, we have, you know, the usual suspects, 47 Church. We have 64 Main, which was a new one, but the gentleman somewhat refused to move his dilapidated car, for lack of a better term. So we cited him. 277 North, which is actually behind the multifamily complex on North Road. They have some trailers there. So we're sending them a reminder that they couldn't have those trailers there. 12 Griffin, we're about to issue a cease and desist because they have some site work that they haven't submitted a zoning permit for. And there's one in 9 Rockville Road with discarded furniture. So we contacted the property owner and we haven't seen any action on their part. With this whole coronavirus thing, it's just me at the office physically. So, you know, it's a matter of, you know, doing what I can with the time frame and, you know, being able to, you know, hold all the hats that I need to wear. So that's that. On the inspection side, the church, obviously they can't provide any church services. I'm talking about the Crossroads Cathedral. So I have it on the list, but, you know, because of the situation, they're not able to do anything right now. So just a matter of this whole situation concluding, and then they might then, you know, make a determination as to when they want to open, and that will kick in an inspection from the departments per se. And then we have 4 ongoing items that we like to do spot checks. So Meadow Farms again, West River Farms with the issue with the erosion issue that they had, and they some of that part it actually belongs on the South Windsor side. So the South Windsor planner, to him, it's all okay. They're in compliance and all that. The developer contacted the office about doing a site visit, but again, you know, he wanted to bring like a whole bunch of people and said, you know, we had the COVID-19 situation, so we need to you know, think about actually meeting, and that wouldn't be a suitable thing at this moment. So that's that with that. 85, 87 reservoir is an issue that have been going on, and the developer, he's going to apply for a zoning permit. But again, it's one issue that, you know, COVID-19, and now he knows that he needs to apply for it, and he's going to be submitting the paperwork. I spoke to him last week, and that's what I have for tonight.
Before you guys leave that, it's Alan Baker. Could I just chime in on some of that?
Sure can.
I just wanted to mention that with the farms Meadow Farms, what do they always call themselves there?
Meadow Farms.
Anyway, Ziegler has until April 1st to respond and get work in, and if not, then they're actually going to pull the bond. So this document reflects the work that's being, figured out, what it's going to take and what he needs to do, and what somebody's going to have to do if he doesn't do it. So just want to make sure you know that he has till April 1st, and then that it's over. We're just moving on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Frank Gowdy, I have a question on 32 Harrington Road.
Go ahead, Frank.
The illegal use in a residential zone of a garage. I went by there today and there had to be at least 6, 7 cars there. And with this COVID-19, he could be spreading that all around. He's got so many customers coming in and out of there. Have we done anything there?
So I don't have the paperwork with me, Frank, but that is a somewhat gray area in the sense that we do have an ordinance for blighted vehicles being left around, vehicles that don't appear to be working. So when you take a look at the criteria on that ordinance, what we're talking about really doesn't address that. So regulatory speaking, I have no tools to deal with that. So we've been there numerous times, driven by numerous times. And obviously he's doing something with it. It doesn't look, it might be that he's a mechanic, but it might be also that maybe he's a car enthusiast. Who knows? There's really no way of knowing by looking at the situation. We haven't seen any business advertising, no invoicing, nothing on social media. So, we don't have anything to grab him, so to speak.
Would it be to your benefit if I could show that people have gone there and paid to have their work done?
Oh, absolutely. If you're able to get like a copy of an invoice or something, that will be highly valuable. And maybe we can tie that into what we're talking about.
And secondly,
yeah,
even if he's doing it as a hobby or whatever you want to call it, doesn't, he has a lift in there. Does he have does he have an oil pit? Where's he dumping the stuff that's going on the floor? Has the building inspector looked at that place?
I don't know.
Can the building inspector look at that place?
I'm sure he could. Haven't thought about that.
I think that might shut him down in itself. You go by there and the door's wide open and there's cars in and he's underneath the car working. And obviously,
at some point, would he need a dealer's license, repair license from DMV?
Of course he does, but he's doing it illegally.
Okay.
Jim Thurs, Ruben, I know the owner personally. I know he's a full-blown mechanic and he's running a full-blown illegal operation out of his garage. I'm sure he's getting paid in cash.
I know people that have paid him. I don't know if I can get them to come and testify that to you or show you an invoice, but it's quite obvious. It's quite obviously obvious.
But like Joe said, he's supposed to have a DOT license to operate a full-blown, but you can't do the residential neighborhood anyways. You're not supposed to. That's the whole principle behind it.
Right. He would have to, rezone technically speaking, he would have to rezone the property and all that stuff, But it's something that has been going on apparently for many years. And am I correct?
Oh yeah, last 5 or 6 years easily.
Okay. So it would be that would be the way, trying to reconcile what the ordinance says and kind of like fit the situation within those parameters. That will be the appropriate way. So,
if you're looking
actually do something with it.
If you're looking for some reason to get in there, just the health, wealth, and safety of the community. If he's dumping that into, I don't know if there's sewers or if he's on septic or what he's on, I mean, just the health, wealth, and safety of the community. That ought to be a good enough reason to get in there and cite them, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, so,
I'm sorry, what was the address there again?
I believe it's 32 Harrington Road. You can't miss it when you go up. If you coming off of 140, go up Harrington Road. It's on the left-hand side. There's probably 6 or 8 cars parked in the back. And if you go there, probably tonight, if you went up, there's probably 5 or 6 cars in front of the 2-bay or 3-bay garage there.
And for clarification, he is not a car enthusiast, we don't believe.
I do not believe he's a car enthusiast. I'm just giving,
Okay.
justification for
Yeah.
his justification for Mike doing it.
So I can see why Ruben's walking the tight line, just to be absolutely sure we have every reason to cite him in violation of whatever. We need the evidence or proof this is happening.
correct.
It's
But
not that we don't doubt you, Commissioner Gowdy. You're absolutely right. I've driven by there myself, but I really haven't spent the time to investigate it.
Well, it seems to me that some of the other citations that you've spoken of, people make a complaint, you go out, you look at it, and you either cite them or you don't, or you get a resolution. I don't understand why you can't do the same thing here. Because I think maybe it's a little more major than, somebody's dumping garbage on my boundary line or what. It just seems to me that the town has the authority to do that. And if they don't, they ought to have.
So it might look that way, but the only mechanism that I have is to actually use ordinances and regulations, and I need to be very careful in how I apply those instruments in order to preserve the element of fairness. Let's put it that way. I basically need, I need evidence
That he's running a business out of his house.
in the ordinance. So,
Well,
Yeah, 'cause
I don't see it as an ordinance problem. I see it as running a zoning problem. He's running a business out of a residential zone. That's not an ordinance. That's something we got to go after. That's what I'm going after. He's just thumbing our nose at us.
Well, Frank, what he's trying to say is that he's got to prove that he's running a business. Because just the fact that the cars are there, if they're all registered vehicles, then they don't meet the blight ordinance because they're not, considered unregistered vehicles. So you have to have some kind of a law that he's breaking. And until you can prove through either invoicing or advertising that he's running a business, the man can just look at you and say, I like working on cars. I do this as a hobby for free.
Frank, we know it's ridiculous. We got to catch him at his own game.
I will try to get someone to I don't know if they got an invoice, but I can probably hopefully get 2 or 3 people that have him do work on a regular basis. As a matter
Or
of
even
fact,
an affidavit. A
Yeah,
sworn
'cause-
affidavit would work.
how about
without
how about if I take my truck down and ask him to do some work? Serious.
Then the IRS would love to have a chat with him too.
It's really frustrating and it's disturbing to me. I mean, it's like you run a planning and zoning and you make rules and regulations and they thumb their nose at us. It's disgusting. Amen.
Okay, Ruben, anything else under old business you'd like to talk about before before we get to Terry?
no, I'm good. Let's see. Yeah, the floor is yours, Terry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, give me a second and I'm going to share the screen. Ruben, you have to disconnect, I think.
I think I did.
Okay, all right. Let me just see what I got here.
Terry, is that some advertising going on there behind you?
Oh, I got,
You don't work for free, do you?
Okay, so can you guys see the plans?
Yeah.
I don't know what that's for. Okay, so For the record, Terry Hahn, Principal, LADA PC, Land Planners. This is an ongoing discussion regarding the Warehouse Point Master Plan and so look at how to make the Warehouse Point for the future for development. The plans that you have in front of you that I since last Thursday, what I want to do is show you how this whole package works and is put together so that you can see sort of how all the pieces fit, what we have, if we can identify anything that we're missing. And ultimately, the question that I have for you is, what do we want to ask the public and what do we want to share with the public with respect to this for the public participation, which we will now have to figure out how to make that happen in an interesting way. So we'll have to play that one by ear. But my intent is to have the public participation portion of this at the beginning of May, if it's possible. So looking at the individual plans, our first one is overall context. So this just shows sort of major elements. We added the blue ditch in. So Main Street, where 91 is, Route 5, where the traffic lights are, just sort of giving an overall picture. This is a new map, so that because we didn't really have anything that was sort of a starting point, especially with respect to talking to the public. Does anyone have any questions on this particular map?
Nope.
Nope.
No, I'm fine.
All right.
I'm fine, Terry.
Okay, moving on. The next map is called the Amenities and Development Opportunities. This was a map that we had put together for part of phase 1, which essentially explains why are we doing this. Warehouse Point is that pinch moment between the train station and the future casino, as well as Route 5. It's, you know, the historic, part of a historic commercial core for East Windsor, and the idea is, what do we want this to become in the future? It's been sort of stuck, I think, in a way over the last, I don't know, 20 years or so. Part of that has to do with the fact that, as we've discussed in the past, the lots are very small. The zoning, even the R1 and the R2 zones, make essentially every or more lots than not of the residential lots existing non-conforming, which causes complications for when you want to expand or do something on your particular residential property. And then the commercial property just has sort of been in limbo for a little while. Every time it seems like we're getting going, we hit some sort of economic problem. And now we have more opportunities to come. So that's the amenities and development opportunities map. Any questions with respect to that particular map?
Nope.
I'm fine.
I'm fine also, Terry.
The third map is an existing conditions map. This again is a new map. We just took, you know, over the time that we've been working in Warehouse Point, we've got some wonderful photographs to sort of illustrate what the area looks like. And so we've just compiled those photographs, representative samples, photographs of the area, just to give an idea of where things are, what it looks like. Again, it's a plan sort of compiled together for specifically for discussions with the public and for reference purposes for the report. Any questions on this particular plan?
Gary, do we need to indicate the year that these photographs were taken or existing conditions? Is it 2018, 2019? I know you've been working a long time on this initiative.
Oh, some of them are like, for example, I did notice that the main fish was probably 2016. But the other ones, like for example, the ones along the river, the blue ditch, those were all 2018 and 19. Theoretically, not other than the main fish, there's really not much that's changed.
Okay, so that's not really all important, just to tie down what existing conditions really means, what year.
Well, I think the existing conditions map, which we updated in 2019, is probably the thing that rules rather than the photographs.
Okay, fair enough.
It is an interesting question, though, because one of the things that's going to come into play is as we're trying to articulate the zoning regulation that would come out of this process, one of the things that I believe we will probably be using is a tool that is often used in zoning regulations, which is the identification of the existing conditions as of what the effective date of the regulation would be, sort of the starting point for things to change, for example. So for example, the parcel that you were just talking about within the public hearing and those farmhouses up on the central portion of Bridge Street, one of the things that we've been talking about is having those buildings essentially stay intact and be retrofitted to their new use, because we want that massing of that farmhouse and the shape, the placement on the street, and all of those elements to stay intact. We just allow for expansion, alternate access points, because a lot of those buildings have finished floors that are slightly higher than you would build if you were building a mixed use facility right now, because you always step into your house, step up and into. So making those handicapped accessible, you need to be able to allow for that construction to occur. So that's, that I think the idea of what constitutes or when constitutes existing conditions does become important for when we move into the zoning regulation. Does anyone have any other comments on this existing conditions plan?
I have none, Terry.
I have none other than the showing of the pictures and everything else is very informative, I think, to the public, and gives them a sense of identification as they go through.
I'm all set with it. Fine with me.
Thank you. Okay, next plan. The concerns and opportunities. This is basically all the things that we've been talking about, all with little bullet points and leaders, and what is it that this is the sort of articulation in a graphic form of how our conversation has been going for the past year and several months. So it's a lot of questions. It's an identification of various different locations that we've sort of looked at and talked about, and just sort of putting all of those questions in one place.
Terry, I noticed in the Connecticut River, there is obviously text that's boxed in yellow, but there's also some text in white boxes. It's
Yes.
too small to read, but why is that different than the
Okay,
yellow?
so what those are, one of the questions that came up was who owned the land
Oh, okay.
across South Water Street, and how does that relate? So essentially, the way this works is the property on, okay, let's call it the east side of South Water Street, where the houses are, own a projection of their property on the west side, on the river side. So there was a discussion at some point where we added all these in, because the question was, how easy would it be to attain all those pieces of property? Who owns them? So at this point, what they are properties that are considered an extension to the river of the parcel that's across the street.
Okay, thank you.
Terry, are any of those parcels across the street separate from the Riverside? Because I'm looking at the state of Connecticut. So they actually own property across the street also, or not?
Yes, so the town, if you start from the bridge, the town owns a little piece that is the intersection. The state then owns two parcels. Then you have the McFarlands who actually own two parcels. There's an existing house there.
Does the state own on the east side of the street also?
Yes, they own the two parcels there. No, they don't own on the east side. No, they do not.
Okay.
They do
So
not.
those parcels are separate of the adjoining or parcels across the street.
Correct.
Okay, so there's not a total uniformity all the way down the road then?
No, there's a couple of little places where there is not a projection across the street. The state of Connecticut's one. There's a town parcel. The town owns a little piece of parcel right opposite Spring Street. If you can see, you know, where it says culvert, no exit for runoff, the town owns a little piece right there. I believe there are 3 properties on the east side of South Water Street that do not have a projection across. Any other
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Nope. I wanted to go back. Any other questions on this plan? Okay, moving on.
Fine with me.
Okay. So the next one we saw at the last meeting, this is the one about the locally identified historic resources and how those historic resources relate to what's been traditionally called the 100-year flood. If you recall, the reason why we were looking at this was to inventory how many of the historic resources are actually within the flood zone. But more importantly, the flood regulations allow for some special conditions for historic properties that are either eligible or listed on the historic register. Specifically, what I'm referring to is that traditionally under the current building code, if you improve a building, whether just in general or as a result of flood damage, if you improve that building more than 25% of its value, you are required to take that building and bring it totally up to code, which tends to result in the demolition of those historic structures, because that doesn't work. In this particular case, the idea is that if the locally identified historic resources are identified and followed through to be eligible or listed on the National Register, then you might allow the homeowner to have the ability to preserve that structure. So that's really for the benefit of the property owner. Any questions on this map?
Terry, it's kind of hard, I'm sorry, Richard Sullivan. Terry, it's kind of hard to see the hash marks for the listing of National Register on historic places.
Because there's only one.
No, that explains why I can't find it. Okay.
That's right, it's the church.
Oh, okay, I see it now. Yep.
So it's the only one. That's why I'm bringing it to your attention, because there are a lot of locally identified historic resources here, but clearly the next step to identify them as eligible or actually do the registering has not been taken. So when the historic resources list was created in the 80s, ultimately nobody ever took the next step, which was to get a grant, talk to the property owners, do the research, do the documentation, and get these properties to either be identified as eligible or actually put them on the list.
Okay, and that would be the responsibility of the homeowner?
Not necessarily. The town could do it. You could, your historic commission could start that process. It's not intended to be onerous on the property owner, but probably your historic commission or another entity could apply for grants. There's grants for things like this from Eversource, also the Connecticut Trust, so that, because they're interested in getting as many properties as possible identified as eligible or actually listed. So there is money, there's some grant money available to do this sort of thing with a group of volunteers or other sort of dedicated people who are interested in historic resources.
Okay, thank you.
Terry, I don't want to digress, but do you know how many locations in town are on the historic register?
It was, on the historic register?
Yeah.
Yeah, I only did the Warehouse Point search.
Okay, no problem.
I do recall that there are a couple of them that I thought that were in Scantic, and I think there was one or two that was in Broadbrook, but it's much lower than you would think. And given the fact that that 1980s list of historic resources is like 23 pages long, it's a sort of inordinate few that have actually been identified that the actual research has been done.
Frank Gowdy, there's one up here in Melrose along 140 from the corner 191 and 140. There's a historic district up about a mile up that my neighbor here, if I can remember her name, she got it onto
Barbara.
Barbara got it onto the National Historic District.
And we could do, you could do something like that here in Warehouse Point, is establish a Warehouse Point Historic District. By doing that, you can identify those things that are considered to be eligible, that, as again, like I said, it does seem to be most successful with one or a number of truly dedicated people who feel that, they can see the sort of public value of doing this.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this plan? Okay.
I have none.
Frank has none.
So, wrong way, sorry. So part of what we're doing is going through the calculations based on a proposed zoning regulations to figure out what the potential impact of the impervious surface increase is within the watershed. Specifically, what we're looking at is, if you look on this map, there are there's 5 asterisks, but there's 4 asterisks along the blue ditch. The location where the pipe comes out from underneath Geisler's and Bridge Street, the crossing at Spring and Holcomb, the culvert crossing at Main Street towards the ball fields, and then the culvert at 91. And those are kind of our critical points that the stormwater modeling right now is looking to find a way to articulate this outside of charts and numbers. So what we're working on right now is to translate the traditional terms, which is a cubic feet per second, which is a rate of water going through at peak times, into what is essentially a height of water going through at those peak times. So, it might be a +1 with under the current conditions. Under the existing zoning, it might be a +3 feet. Under the proposed zoning, it might be slightly less at a +2.5 feet, but we're trying to find a mechanism so that people looking at this map and just talking to people in general and with the public can understand what we're really talking about, because nobody understands what CFS is. They're just, other than the fact that 5 CFS is basically your garden hose at full bore. What's, what the difference between 24 CFS and one watershed here and 34 CFS is, that has no meaning to people. It's just numbers. So right now, one of the things we're working at is just trying to figure out how to articulate that in a manner to sort of walk the public through that. Any questions on this plan?
I'm fine with it.
Richard Sullivan, I'm fine.
Now we have a series of plans. These are the ones that you've seen before. This is the existing zoning. Specifically, what we're highlighting is the amount of allowed impervious coverage within those zones. The high is the M1 zone at 75%. The B2 is at 65%. The residential ones are at 25%. So one of the first portions of the stormwater model is taking those as maximum allowed impervious surface within this watershed and seeing what that does. It becomes a little complicated because, for example, the R1 zones in Dean, School, and Spring already exceed the minimum or the maximum allowed impervious cover for those zones. So the existing conditions doesn't quite match up with the zoning allowed impervious coverage in those residential zones, which is pretty consistent with what we've been talking about this whole time. So that's just something to think about. We did add the, you've got the red for the highway zone in this particular one. At the moment, the current zoning doesn't hit this, the cloverleaf, but you'll notice in the next couple of maps, we added that in based on our conversation that we had on some previous meetings. Does anybody have any questions on this map?
I do not.
Thank you. So the big flashy maps in the zoning part of this are the next two maps. This is our future use and density plan. We added in the highway zone. We previously had taken that out. We added that back in, and we included the cloverleaf area on this particular map. This is the one where we talk about what we want to have happen in each one of these areas that ultimately get translated into a zoning regulation. But these are just sort of ideas and requirements and just the theory here. You'll notice that I don't have any requirements or particulars under the highway zone. And one of the things that I did differently this time versus the previous versions is I've separated out the sports dome area, that part of Main Street, because it was originally part of the Bridge Street commercial area. It was all the yellow and the greenish color were actually a continuation of the same zone. So I have separated those out. And I'm going to need to get some feedback from you guys on the highway area and what you would like to see in the warehouse zone, what I'm calling Warehouse Point commercial recreation area. Does that make sense to be called that?
Terry, how would that land area that's green be accessed via that road? There's a cul-de-sac?
Yes. Yep.
Is that the only public access?
That is the only public access, unless something happened to the interchange.
Okay.
Because it does not extend to Holcomb. There's no, there's no tuck-in on those properties, so that it extends to some other street right-of-way. So it's strictly the cul-de-sac.
And I believe that cul-de-sac is a town road?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
How big is that green area? How many acres approximately? If you
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably 40, maybe 50 acres.
Mhm.
It's a more or less the same size as the previous big box application, which was actually made up of 3 different properties.
So that currently is one parcel of property, correct?
No, it's actually 3, 4 parcels. There was a subdivision sometime in the past, as part of the, I think as part of the Sports Dome application. And way back when we were doing file research, a long time ago, before the dome actually got built, it was actually approved and laid out as a series of commercial buildings, sort of individual, like an office park type thing.
Okay, so if it's 4 separate properties, they don't you've got landlocked parcels there that don't have any access to them?
If you look coming down the cul-de-sac, there's the property to the north that has frontage on the cul-de-sac. There's a property to the south that has a little sliver of part of the cul-de-sac. Then you've got the area where the dome is that has frontage along the cul-de-sac. But if you continue to go north, where the boundary is between the green and the yellow, that parcel there is a landlocked parcel.
Okay, and are there any deeded right-of-ways that you're aware of?
I didn't do any title research
Okay.
for that. But right now, I'm not sure where it would be possible, because all the existing properties between that parcel and the road right-of-ways on Spring or Holcomb have houses on them.
Yeah, it would almost look like it would require a property purchase off of Holcomb to gain access.
Some kind or another, yeah.
I have a question for Frank Audi. Frank, was this the former property of Wagner before he sold to the Sports Dome people?
Joe, yeah, I think it is. Yes, I think it is. It was his, yeah.
And I think that, excuse me, Richard Sullivan, I think that landlocked piece, Joe, is still part of the Wagner estate, or
Okay.
under the jurisdiction of Donnie Wagner.
Yeah, Frank Gowdy, that might be in some kind of a trust, I think. I'm not sure about that, but
That parcel has existing streams, wetlands. It picks up the culvert that goes from the Walmart site, goes across 91 and discharges in that area. It's very wet over there along that edge.
So Terry, I just want to get our task in order here. So you're kind of asking the commission what our vision for this parcel might be as we look toward the future. Is
That's
that
correct.
That's
The green area, and also the highway zone, the Warehouse Point, what will be a Warehouse Point highway zone. So basically, you asked me to include the cloverleaf, portion of the cloverleaf. You'll notice that as we head towards Bridge Street, it includes the hotel, and then that piece of property that is immediately adjacent that just looks like it's itching to have a hotel on, as well as the gas stations, and then the office park as we head north towards Enfield.
Okay, well, my opinion, I guess, on the green section, based on the conditions, it's not a very developable piece of property. So it really kind of only leads itself to passive recreation.
Well, I'm sorry, I must have I don't want to be misleading. Where the leader comes in to the, here, hang on. No, it's not gonna let me do it, sorry. No, sorry. Okay, so where the leader comes into the screen here at this location, this is a beautiful soccer field right here. The wet part is over here.
And the greater
Yeah.
question is, what do we vision for the entire green area moving forward? What are the opportunities for rezoning? Are there any opportunities for rezoning that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's sewer and water on the street, you know, so it could be something else. And you know, should we just take the tactic, which is sort of what I did here, which was that the use is best set up as commercial recreation, which is what it is, commercial recreation, office, and accessory uses of what's currently there? Or can you imagine, or would you be interested in having something else over there?
Well, the fact that it abuts a lot of residential, it kind of have to be a case by case basis as to what exactly wanted to go in there.
Okay. So it's a little more sensitive in terms of potential future development. You've got screening issues, you've got that, you know, that sort of thing. So we can certainly include those as requirements. But again, the question is here, is this one of those things that we should just leave as commercial recreation, or is this, you know, sort of being set up as an office park? You know, what do we really want to see happen here?
I mean, I think you could,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think you could throw in future residential if you wanted to do that.
Oh, okay. How about the rest of you guys? What do you think?
Terry, this is Joe. Do you think it's unrealistic if the yellow section were expanded farther south into the green area?
Well, I just think that where that interface is between the yellow and the green, right here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the core of your wetland area here. Because if you notice, you see on the yellow where the fields end, according to the previous application, you have wetlands over here in this area that then extend into this interface zone.
Okay, so it's a natural break.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely, you know, it's a drainage area. It's not formally considered to be part of the blue ditch, because I don't think it channelizes in the same way that the blue ditch does, but it's taking the water from 91 and across Route 5 and bringing it towards the river.
So presently it ends up in the blue ditch no matter what.
Yes, pretty much. It comes in, and you see this spur here on this on the south side of the houses on Holcomb. It comes in there.
Richard Sullivan, and so I guess the real question with that blue ditch is how much more water can it handle?
And that's what we're figuring out. Yep. What does that mean? Correct.
Terry, is this something we can come back to?
Absolutely.
Put a placeholder, you know, put it in
Yes.
the parking lot that I don't want to get hung up on that one slide. This is,
No,
this is all good stuff.
ongoing discussion. So put this in the back of your head, because this is something, whatever we do here, we're kind of at the edge of where we've been focused. We haven't really looked at either one of these zones. And so that's kind of the last piece to the overall puzzle. I'd be happy to table it, but just keep it in the back of your mind, because I'm not going to stop asking.
Okay. And eventually you have to finish the assignment.
I do, yes, you know.
Well, Terry, for the highway zone area, did you pretty much mirror what the Route 5 corridor has?
Not almost. What I did not do, sorry, keeps moving on me whenever I do that. What I did was I took out these buildings here because these are currently residential. That's part of the application that you saw, the 134, 143, 143. The highway zone stops more or less here, so I included that. I included this parcel. So that's that vacant one that we thought would make a good hotel someday. So
No, what I meant is for potential uses, did you mirror what already is on the Route 5 corridor?
yeah, I mirrored no, what I did was I mirrored what's there. So we have gas stations, hotel, retail, and office park. So do you want any more?
Well, I'm just thinking because we have a highway zone on the Route 5 side, so I would say that it should be permitted to do whatever's on the Route 5 side of the highway should be the same if we're calling this a highway, like the highway interchange zone.
Okay, that's fine. Like I said, I need some feedback because we talked about this in general, but we didn't really get into the details, and now it's time for those details.
Well, Mike, on the other side of the highway, just take for example, there is restaurant use. Right now in that red area, the highway area, restaurant use is not one of the ones listed.
And one of the reasons why I did that was because I'm trying to get the restaurants to be what will ultimately be the smaller restaurants down Bridge Street rather than, I don't think this is the area that you want to have, for example, fast food, that's really Route 5. The drive-through area, the drive-through fast food type stuff, that's really Route 5 focused. Whereas on Bridge Street, the restaurants are really dealing with elsewhere other than at the highway.
Okay.
Well, I look at this, and the one thing we don't have around here is a McDonald's. So if a McDonald's wanted to plop on the other side of the highway, opposite of where Burger King is on one side, that would be a consideration.
Okay.
Does anyone else feel the same way as Mike does?
I mean, my opinion is immediately exiting the highway doesn't really put you into the village area as I consider it. Because I'd say right away you've got a hotel and a gas station. If there were a fast food restaurant there, to me, it just kind of fits in along the highway corridor where travelers going down